A 25-year-old guy walks into David Goggins' office looking for a way out of his own life. He's struggling with his weight, his career is non-existent, and he's perpetually stuck between starting a business or joining the military. Goggins doesn't see a lack of talent, he sees a pattern of retreat. The young man had developed a habit of surrendering his weapons at the very first moment of friction. This behavior isn't isolated. It reflects a broader trend toward prioritizing comfort over growth. We find ourselves looking for the job with the most peace, the study guide with the fewest pages, and a lifestyle that demands the absolute minimum of our nervous systems. When we avoid challenges this consistently, we lose the confidence required to face even basic resistance. We begin to mistake our biological safety mechanisms for a permanent personality trait. This reaction is rooted in the limbic system, the oldest part of the brain, designed solely for survival. When you wake up at 4 a.m. or push through a workout, your brain perceives discomfort as a threat and screams danger. We feel the painful friction between our current reality and our untapped potential, and we often choose to numb that sensation. We reach for cheap dopamine, scrolling through feeds, or eating processed sugar to silence the voice that tells us we are capable of more. People often wait for motivation to fix this, but motivation is a volatile fuel that evaporates the moment things get cold or painful. To move past this cycle of comfort, we have to look past our mindset and examine the actual hardware driving our decisions. Researchers at Stanford, including Dr. Andrew Huberman, have identified a specific physical structure that may govern our ability to lean into resistance, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, or AMCC. The size of this region varies significantly based on behavior. In those who struggle with chronic apathy, the AMCC is visibly smaller. In elite athletes and people who routinely endure high-friction environments, it is measurably larger. The most critical finding is how this tissue grows. It does not respond to things you enjoy doing. It only physically expands through voluntary effort applied to tasks you explicitly do not want to perform. Forcing yourself to study tired, choosing cold over warm showers, isn't just a mental exercise. These acts of discipline are the physiological requirements for thickening the walls of the AMCC. Willpower functions like a physical muscle. Without the consistent application of voluntary suffering, the brain's capacity for resilience begins to atrophy. David Goggins tested the limits of this biological hardware during a 100-mile ultramarathon in San Diego, which he entered with zero specific training. By the 112-kilometer mark, his body was in a state of total collapse. He was experiencing kidney failure. His feet were a mass of broken bones and bleeding blisters, and he was physically unable to stand. Every logical impulse in his brain was demanding that he quit. To his survival instincts, continuing wasn't just difficult, it was irrational. He didn't rely on positive affirmations to get back up. He decided to stop identifying as a victim of the pain, and instead adopted the identity of someone who consumes it. He finished the race, discovering that when the mind begs to quit, the body has typically only utilized about 40% of its actual capacity. The remaining 60% exists in a reserve tank that the brain hides for our own perceived safety. Our actual potential only becomes accessible once we cross the boundary of what we think we can endure. Running from discomfort creates a life of fragility. By contrast, when we voluntarily choose the harder path, we build an immunity to the inevitable hardships that life eventually throws at us. This was illustrated in the Universe 25 experiment, where mice were placed in a perfect habitat with unlimited food and no threats. In this environment of total comfort, the mice lost their natural social structures and their drive to survive. The population eventually turned on itself and collapsed entirely. Modern life mirrors this enclosure. We are surrounded by convenience, soft furniture, endless entertainment, and instant gratification that slowly erodes our cognitive and physical sharpness. Without the requirement of struggle, our biological systems begin to decay. A life stripped of resistance is a recipe for long-term misery. Reversing this requires setting goals that are large enough to generate actual fear. If you aren't intimidated by what you're trying to achieve, you aren't providing the stimulus required for your brain to grow. You have to cultivate the habit of leaning in at the exact moment your brain asks to stop. Forcing out 5 extra minutes of work or reading one more page when you're exhausted is how you manually expand that AMCC tissue. Goggins used to stand before a mirror every night and speak with brutal honesty. He refused to use soft language to describe his failures. He called himself lazy when he was lazy, and used that truth as the foundation for change. At the end of your life, you will effectively answer to two versions of yourself: the person you became and the person you are capable of becoming. You can choose the temporary comfort of the couch today, or you can choose the intentional pain required to bridge the gap between those two people. The only way to avoid the hell of regret is to walk toward the friction now.